Thank you, thank you, thank you. So, what are we going to talk about? Rob Zombie, maybe.
You know we were going to ask you about it.
You know, it's funny, Bill Mosley and I were driving the car around the hotel. My Munster coach is on display out in the back, and I reached out to Rob because he drove the car a couple of weeks ago. And Bill, he says, "You boys have fun." So he's got his hands full right now in pre-production for the movie, so I can't wait for it to come out. It's going to be great.
Yeah. Well, I was kind of wondering, like, do you have any hopes for the show? Do you know it? Do you know anything about it?
Yeah, I saw some of the storyboards and the look of it and the feel of it, and you know, he's a huge fan of the show. And you know, he's as a person, you know, when you go to his house, his stage presence isn't that's not what he does. I mean, he's a performer, like Alice Cooper, whatever. They do a stage show and they go home and they have a real life as well. And him and Sherry Moon are going to be wonderful. She's going to be Lily, of course. You know, she's all his projects include Sherry. She's going to be a wonderful Lily. And I know I can't disclose too much, but I'm very confident that it's going to be really cool. He's got a very interesting spin on it that I would have never thought of, that I think is going to be wonderful.
That is so exciting. Can I ask how you first met Rob Zombie? Tell us about that.
I met Rob about 15 years ago. He was performing in Philadelphia, and I was in New York, and a friend of mine said, you know, Rob is a big Munsters fan. If you'd like to meet him, he's invited us down to Philly. So we drove like crazy then to get down there. I got there a little too late to introduce him because of traffic, but when I went backstage, I was wearing a Rob Zombie shirt, he was wearing an Eddie Munster shirt, and he signed my picture, "Go Munster, go." So I used it in my photograph. I only met him briefly, and then back in December of 19, the new Munsters Go Home Blu-ray came out on Rhino. It's called the Shout Factory now, but it used to be Rhino Records. And he was hired, and I was hired by them to sit and do commentary during the movie screening. So if you get the box, if you get this DVD Blu-ray, you'll hear me and Rob speaking for 90 minutes as the movie in real time, talking about his filmmaking and my memories, and that's kind of when we reconnected. And that was back in December of 19, and then recently I was up at his house and I took my Munster coach out, and if you're on his Instagram, you probably saw the video of him driving and him complaining about, "You didn't tell me the brakes were bad. Herman needs new brakes." That was great. I'm really excited about the movie though. He's been working for it for 20 years, and I wasn't aware that apparently he used to work on Pee-wee's Playhouse as a set designer.
No way.
So with that in mind, it shows that he can do non-scary, gory stuff, which I'm counting on. Because I've seen the look and the feel of what he's doing, and it's not a dark thing. So there you go. How about Lidsville? Anybody ever been to Lidsville? I'm talking about weird stuff.
So let's go back to the beginning. How did you get into the acting when you were pretty young?
Acting, you know, it's fun. I was just talking to Bill next to me, and we were both commenting how you accidentally stumble into situations, and a lot of people in the business, happenstance, planets align, you know, whatever, kismet. Something happens sometimes that just occurs that changes your life forever. And for him, it was becoming an actor when he was actually trying to be a writer. And for me, it was taking a ride with my little sister in 1960 to have a photography shoot done for her so she could do some print modeling, because she was a really adorable little girl, and I didn't have a babysitter, so I went along for the ride. And after they were done shooting her pictures, the gentleman's name was Amos Carr, who was the go-to Hollywood kid, you know, photographer, and often had a studio on Hollywood Boulevard. And when he was done with my sister, he looked over and he goes, "You know, he's got a good look about him. You mind if I take a couple pictures of your son?" "No, I'm good, sure, go ahead." So he put his hat on me, and I got this goofy, you know, look, and he put it in the window of his studio as an example of some of his work. Simple as that. Not an actor, just a kid who took a picture. And it just so happened that a director and a producer were walking by one day, and they looked over, and they were casting a movie, and they hadn't found the youngest son of Eddie Albert and Jane Wyatt yet. They sought me out and went on an interview. Never had any experience. Worked 6 weeks. Soupy Sales, Jane Wyatt, Eddie Albert, Brenda Lee, 15 years old, was my older sister. And by the time the movie was over, I picked up General Hospital, and I picked up a Kellogg's Cornflakes commercial and a Frosted Flakes commercial. So in a period of 2 months, we went from second grade nobody to a movie, a series, and a couple commercials. And the Munsters came a few years later, after the real McCoys for a year. And by the time that happened, I was, I had done a lot of work in the early 60s, and it just sort of carried on until I was about 20 years old when I decided that I didn't want to be an actor anymore.
Is it true that you weren't the original choice for Early Monsters?
Happy Durbin? Yeah, Happy. Well, actually, this is an interesting story. Bill Mooney was their first choice. Bill Mooney's mom didn't like the idea of the makeup, so they said, no, we're not going to do that. I was living in Illinois with my grandmother at the time. I wasn't even in Hollywood. And then they cast Happy Durbin, and another woman named Joan Marshall was playing the matriarch of the show as a character named Phoebe Munster. The networks saw the pilot and said, we still want to produce the show, but we don't like the mom and we don't like the kids, so we need to recast it. And it just so happened that Yvonne DiCarlo, who was a major movie star in the 40s and 50s, was available because her husband was a stuntman who was hurt in a How the West Was Won train accident. He was badly disfigured, and the medical bills weren't covered by the insurance, so she pretty much spent all her money saving her husband's life, and then afterwards she took the job because there was a monetary payday for her. Back in the day, Hollywood movie stars didn't do television, so she was one of the first movie stars to take on a TV role, and she did it really well. A lot of people thought she couldn't pull it off, but she did great comedy, and I think she was as much of a reason for the success of the show as anybody. So we had a Yvonne DiCarlo movie star, and they flew me out. My agent contacted them. She caught wind that they were looking for the kid, and she approached them. And they go, "Oh, we've looked at every kid in Hollywood," and she says, "He's not in Hollywood. He's in Illinois with his grandma. And if you'll fly him out, I can get him on the plane." And I got off the plane. I did the screen test with Yvonne DiCarlo. They said, "Don't go home," because I was living in Illinois. They go, "Stay put, make arrangements to report to work." Now, at this time, my mom had married a baseball player who was traded from LA to the Washington Senators, so my whole family was on the East Coast. So I lived with my uncle. I hired a woman to take me to work, and for the next 2 years, I'd fly to DC once a month to go visit my family, and I did the Eddie Munster thing, so it was a pretty hectic 2 years. So it was fake.
And there's so many people of so many different ages who love the Munsters, and we'd love to hear some of your favorite memories from set.
The fan base, it's very weird. It's a one-of-a-kind show, no doubt about it. I mean, it was just unique in that respect. But for some reason, this is a 55, 56-year-old show that literally people walk up to my table and they get a big smile on their face and they just reach over and they go, "Thank you." And I go, "For what?" "Just thank you for being on that show. It brought so much joy to me growing up." And you have this extended family and friendship, and people say, "Don't you ever get tired of doing this?" I go, how do you get tired of sharing someone's genuine joy about what you did a long time ago as a kid, having a good time, number one, enjoying it, and then having it resonate the same way you did 3 generations later, and especially in this day and age, when things aren't going so well, people have these fond memories of sharing it with their grandparents or their uncle or their aunt. So it's just a very unique situation, and it was well done. It had good casting. It had great guest stars. We had cool cars, cool music. It was a really great show, but it just lasted 2 years. But most people think it was on 5 years.
Yeah, that's because there was 70-something episodes in just 2 years. That's insane.
It was mad. It was very unique. Very, very short period of time. Back in the 60s, TV was a whole different world than it is today. I did My Favorite Martian. I did Mr. Ed's. I did I Dream of Genies. Back then, it didn't have to be a reality-based show to be on television. Non-reality-based shows were very popular, as were westerns. But it was fun. It's been very good to me.
And how did being on the Munsters at the time impact you, and how is it impacting you still today?
Well, it didn't really impact me. You'd think it would, but it was just another job. Universal Studios was a great place to hang out when I wasn't on call and I had some free time. Oh my God, I could go, the McHale's Navy Lagoon was one of my favorite destinations. Tim Conway was very nice. Ernest Borgnine was great. My uncle supplied horses to Laredo, to Virginia, and Gunsmoke, so I would go up and see Uncle John. It was fun to just go, you know, what do 12-year-old little boys like to do? They like to go explore. And, you know, you talk about having a really perfect place to go. Not to mention George Barris's shop on Wednesdays to go check out, you know, Sonny and Cher or Elvis or whoever was picking up their custom car. And then slot cars were all the rage, so I got to go pick my slot car track and my slot cars. And I just had a good time. I wouldn't have traded my childhood for anybody's. And I was born in '53. I started working in '60, and in 1960 to 1974 was just a wonderful time for music and muscle cars and television programming. So I'm very blessed.
I remember playing with my dad's old slot car sets. Like
slot cars?
Yes.
Yeah, well,
that was part of my childhood too.
They're back again.
Yes, and that was 30 years ago, but that was my childhood too. But there it is. There were hand-me-downs.
Yeah.
So, does the audience have any questions?
Yeah. Any questions out there?
Not yet? Okay, that's fine. I'll come back.
Yes, sir. You talk about slot cars in your childhood. Is that part of your childhood that you still hang on to today or participate in today from your childhood?
The slot cars?
Yeah.
No, the closest thing, what I do is, I was really lucky. When I wasn't in the studio, my mom had married a baseball player. So I was lucky enough to go to the ballpark a lot and get to know all the big stars and all the teams from the 60s. So that was really cool. And then a little bit later, right after the Munsters, you know, mini bikes were big and dirt bikes. So I grew up not wearing a helmet and skateboarding and roller skating, you know, all the good stuff that kids got to do back then without being wrapped in bubble wrap. You know, so we grew up with lots of scraped knees and lots of bruises and a broken bone or two, but I wouldn't have traded it for anything. And then I got into muscle cars. I turned 16 in '69, and my first car was a Mach 1, and then I wound up with a 427 Vet. Now today, the Munster Coach that you saw up there, that's my car. It's a big block Chevy, 500 horse, and I get to go around the country, meet nice people. I'm a member of a great car club, and I do a lot of automotive events. So I found a great little niche to the best of both worlds. But what I'm very excited about is I have a new YouTube channel that is called Coach to Coast. And I don't know how many people remember Charles Kuralt was a original RV guy. He was like the godfather of the road trips. I've started picking up where he left off because I really enjoy the road. I enjoy meeting people in Middle America and, you know, the not so big stars and interesting stories, and especially veteran driven. So I'm putting together a channel called All Things Munster, and which will include the Coach to Coast, but I'm riding the wave of the Rob Zombie buzz and the Munster buzz to where we're going to put together a show featuring all the great stories at the past, using the Munsters as the top. But the pyramid will go down to George Barris, to Rob Zombie, to my friends, your friends, America's friends. Not a political statement thing, just all about Americana. And I'm really looking forward to it. And it'll be my YouTube channel, and hopefully it'll allow me to monetize it and do that next year, and then the year after that go international with it and go all over the world and see that, because the Munsters has got a global fan base. So I can do this all over the world. And I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, and then the Munsters spans so many generations. My father's generation, mine, little brothers, little sisters, children now. How does that feel? That is insane, in the best way.
It's, like, I'll give you an example. I went to a radio station, and maybe a 21, 22-year-old girl was at the reception desk, and she walks in, and she goes, I gotta tell you something. She goes, you don't know how important you were to me. When I was younger, I had very severe depression, and the Munsters was the only show that would get me out of my depression, and you were my imaginary friend during the darkest point in my life. So it's like, how do you not appreciate what you've done to people? And everybody loves the show. I haven't run into anybody that doesn't like the show. Yeah, maybe they like the Addams Family better, but the point is they watched them both, and they both had good memories. And then the fact that it's a wholesome show, pretty timeless. To me, it's kind of like my Twilight Zone or the Honeymooners shows that are the Beverly Hillbillies. I have my favorites. There's people that come up and say, I love that show, and the little Herman and Eddie talk that you hear about. It doesn't matter what you look like, and if you're tall or short or thin, it's the size of your character, the strength of your character, the size of your heart. That gets 100 million shares on Facebook because it's so timely and it's in today's atmosphere, it's good to have wholesome shows that kids can watch with the family and the grandparents, and everybody just seems to get along.
Well, messages like that and other messages that the Munsters provided were very important. And they did it in a subliminal way where they weren't shoving it down your throat. Right.
I just tell people, I have a good time. I enjoy meeting people. They enjoy meeting me. They walk. How lucky can you be when someone walks up and you put a smile on their face and they walk away happier than they were before you met them? I'm just a kid actor who grew up, but the bottom line was I was lucky enough to be part of something that I can appreciate, and people seem to appreciate it too.
I mean, I ran into you in the elevator yesterday. Did you see the smile?
Yeah.
Did you see the smile?
Yeah.
She told me that. She texted me and I could see the
She
smile.
wasn't here yet. She was waiting for a flight.
I'm doing your panel tomorrow.
I'm doing it now tomorrow. I'm like, oh my god.
That was fun. It happens all the time. I mean, it's just a feel-good situation. Everybody's got the sort of what is it, Shakespeare, the world's a stage and everybody's an actor.
Mm-hmm.
I got to be Eddie Munster.
And what is the work that you're most proud of? Because, you have the Munsters, obviously that's a huge legacy, but you've done some other great work too.
Well, there's two things. The one that was most exciting was doing the Monkees Christmas show. And you got to remember, the Monkees in 1968 were as big as the Beatles. I missed meeting, the Beatles came on the Munster set one day and I wasn't working that day. So I missed meeting the Beatles. Now, you would have thought that maybe one of the adults would say, oh God, Butch is gonna really, really be bummed. Let's get an autograph picture for Butch. No.
Oh.
So the next year, 2 years later, there was this interview for the Monkees, and I was in the 8th grade. Normally, I wouldn't tell anybody at school what I was doing. It was my private life. But when I got that part, everybody in school knew about it. I was like tooting my own horn. So I worked the whole week with the Monkees. That was my probably most exciting week as a kid actor, to be around those guys. My best work probably was, there was a movie called Chuck Jones did the Phantom Toll Booth, and I was lucky enough to work for 2 years with Chuck and all the best voiceover people of the day, Mel Blanc, June Foray, Dawes Butler, Hans Conried. That was an interesting thing to do because it was a really cool book, and I really enjoyed working with Chuck Jones because you don't get much better than that. But those are the two things. I did some Disney work that I'm proud of, but those things are other than the Munsters. Yeah.
Phantom Tollbooth's one of my favorite books.
It's great. I mean, if I had kids, I was going to name my kid Milo. I never got married, so I never had kids. But I always thought Milo was a cool name.
Same. I'm never having them, but if I did, Milo would be the name.
Yeah, no, that's a good movie, and I was lucky enough to meet Norman Juster before he passed away 2 years ago. Had a wonderful time talking to him. So yeah, that was good.
Awesome. And we'd love to know, are you a horror fan? Are you a scary movie fan?
Not really. I'm a comedy fan. I'm also I like biographies. I'm not big into horror, although I like a good thriller. I'll tell you the kind of movies I like. I like the kind of movies that could possibly be real, like The Creature of the Black Lagoon, The Birds. What if the birds all got together? They could do some serious damage.
They could.
A creature could actually be a gill man living in the Amazon. To me, that was a believable story. Psycho, working at New Hitchcock, and I was out of Universal, so that was kind of cool. But as far as gore and stuff, no, not too much. But I like the classic horror movies, the Universal movies of the classic nature. I love those. I just don't like the gore and guts movies.
Sure.
Do we have any other questions at the moment?
Yes, sir.
Are you making any money off the reruns?
No, nobody made any money off reruns. Only Jackie Gleason and Lucille Ball and people that own their own production companies, like Ozzie Nelson. The average actor that had a SAG contract wasn't protected until the mid-70s when they did restructure the standard contract. But up to that point, you pretty much had to have the clout to insert certain clauses for yourself because the standard contract didn't cover it. And especially when you're an 11-year-old kid, you didn't have any vision of that point.
Did they ever consider you playing a role in the Addams Family? I know you were in the Munsters.
Yeah.
You can talk about the Addams Family too. Were you ever asked to star in that show, the Addams Family?
No, the one thing that I did, it's funny you should mention that, there was an Addams Family Funhouse, which was a horrible TV show that was done 1/2 hour. It was Jack Riley played Gomez, Liz Torres played Morticia, Pat McCormick was Lurch, Stubby K, oh my God, Stubby K was a professor, and I played Pugsley, and this woman named Helen Von Sant Lisa was a Wednesday. But we had Jim Neighbors with our guest star. So they did the Addams Family Funhouse, which was kind of funny to play Pugsley since you were Eddie Munster, but it wasn't very good. And I was never included in any of the Addams Family movies, no.
I love Liz Torres, and I cannot picture that.
No, it was horrible.
At all.
Oh, it was bad. It was so bad. And you know who Jack Riley was, Mr. Carlin from Newhart.
Yeah.
How long did it take to do the makeup?
Yes.
Long time?
Interesting, the makeup thing was cool. Mike Westmore, he was still an apprentice, and I was his first ward. His job was to make up me, then do Marilyn, and then go up into the lab and make headpieces for Herman, my ears for the next day. And he wasn't even a makeup man yet. He was still an apprentice under his Uncle Bud. But Mike and I bonded like this, and we became really, really good friends. And, you've seen Mackenzie, his daughter, on Face Off. I mean, he's legendary. You don't get any better than Mike Westmore as far as a makeup man. And there's nothing against me and Dick Smith and all the other guys, Rick Baker. They all do great work, but Mike Westmore, I was very, very lucky to be part of it. And then make a long story, a long-winded answer to your question, it started off as an hour, maybe an hour and 20, but we got it down to about 45 minutes.
And that was every day?
And it was only 3 days a week, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday.
See, I didn't know Mike Westmore was part of that because I'm a huge Mackenzie Westmore fan because I'm a huge Passions fan.
Yeah.
And I love her effects work, and I knew who she was and knew who her father was. I didn't know he was part of that. That's so cool.
Yeah, no, it was the Westmores. If you ever want to read something interesting, they were like Hollywood royalty. Every Westmore ran a studio. There was like 8 of them. There was Bud and Wally and Perce and Frank and Marvin and Monty. I mean, they were just everywhere.
Yes. Any others right at the moment? No? Okay, well, we took some questions online for our podcast from our audience. And one came from Peter Skelos, and he asks, he notated rather, that you worked with both Beverly Owen and Priest as Marilyn, and which one was your favorite?
I had a huge crush on Beverly Owen. It was horrible. I was like, oh. And she was so sweet, and she was so unhappy. She didn't want to be on the show. Her agent promised her if she went out for the pilot, it would never get picked up. It would be a week's work paycheck, and she'd be home next week. And here it is. The show's a success. She's stuck in LA. She's in love with a guy in New York who's the producer of Captain Kangaroo. And but anyway, she was so sweet. She actually came down on her day off and picked me up in a little Volkswagen, drove me all the way back up to Hollywood, and we went and saw Mary Poppins together. It wasn't the premiere, but it was the premiere week, and that's how kind she was. And it was like, I tell people I was like my first date.
That's a good first date.
But when she left the show, the good news is her husband helped them open up, and they created Sesame Street together. So there was a happy ending to that. She had kids, she was married for a long time, and Pat Priest stepped in. Wonderful woman, still friends with her, and I was lucky to have three beautiful women, Yvonne DiCarlo and Yvonne, Bev, and Pat. So yeah, Beverly was my favorite.
Yeah. Both equally lovely too.
Yes.
Of course.
And I'd love to know, was there a particularly challenging scene or moment during the Munsters that you feel really accomplished about?
No, not really. No, it was the only thing with the Munsters, because there were so many special effects. We rehearsed a lot, and there was a lot of rehearsal because number one, it was shot on film, so it wasn't like videotape where you could just like redo it. Film cost money, so we rehearsed a lot. And I would have rather been in school because a kid has to have 3 hours of school, where the adults, they go out for a cigarette break, or they go to have a long lunch, where I would rather be in school, because the sooner I'm done with school, the sooner I can go home. So the only frustration part for me was having Monday and Tuesday were like off days for cast, and the adults, they'd come in for an hour and go home. Well, I'm out of school until after lunch. That was not the only problem that bothered me. And then in summer, when I was out of school, those would be the episodes where they featured Eddie, so they could get that 3 hours of school and put it in front of the camera. So whether it was summer or whether it was I was working, a lot, which is okay.
And you talked about the makeup process for yourself. How long did it take for Herman and Grandpa?
Herman was 2 hours. He actually got in there about 6 in the morning, and he'd be in makeup till a little after 8. I would be coming in as he was leaving. Al was about an hour, maybe an hour and 20 minutes. Yvonne was about an hour and 20 minutes, and Pat, obviously. Beverly was actually a brunette, so they had to put a blonde wig on her, and it took quite a bit of time. But Pat, being a blonde, she had it easy. Just came in and boop.
This might be hard because there's a lot of episodes, but do you have a favorite Munsters episode?
I have several. Zombo comes to mind with Louie Nye, where I believe he's a real guy on TV, and I have a big, a monster. I have sort of a crush on Zombo. I really think he's a cool guy. Herman gets jealous of Zombo. The Hot Rod Herman episode where we introduce the Dragula, we go to the drag strip because outdoors in the drag strip in the cars.
Classic.
Eddie's nickname was a good one, where I grew a beard simply because it just was so funny to see a 10-year-old kid with a full beard. And Dr. Dudley, Paul Lynn, we had a very good trip to go visit Dr. Dudley, who was hilarious. And then Bill Moody guest star on Come Back Little Googie, where he played a punky little kid. So I had someone to hang out with for that week. And there were several, but those 4 come to mind.
Those are good ones.
Oh, man, thank you.
So you took a break from 1974 through 91. What were you doing in that break?
Getting in a lot of trouble.
Amen.
You gotta understand, I grew up in the 60s in Hollywood. Bad behavior was acceptable. I've been sober 11 years now, so I went 41 years, full throttle. I was a functioning alcoholic drug addict. What can I say? But the thing was, it was commonplace in Hollywood to be indulging in party activities. But that's what I did. I worked in the gaming industry. I bought and sold a lot of muscle cars. Did a few things I shouldn't do, but all in all, it was, the only person I really hurt was myself.
Sure. So what made you decide to take the step to clean up and get sober?
Well, I was actually figuring out, I figured I was going to die. I was on the East Coast, and I was drinking like 30 beers a day. I was in a bad place. I was in a little dark place, but I was still functioning. And a friend of mine reached out and said, there's a guy in California that would love to get a kid actor sober if you haven't been through rehabs, because he wants someone that can carry on his work. So his name was Jim A. He was the original interventionist for the show Intervention. So he reached out to me, and his dad was a big Munsters fan. He goes, I'll make you a deal. If you come out here, I'll get you sober. I'll teach you how to stay sober. And I've helped 8,000 people in 22 years. And if you do what I tell you to do, you'll reach millions of people in a year. So I kind of did it as I wasn't really sure what it was gonna. But I went out and I checked in and did it. And I spent 90 days out there. And then I wound up staying in sober living for almost 2 years. And we came to an agreement, and I dropped the rock. I stopped drinking, stopped smoking, I stopped everything. And it's coming up on 11 years, and I've helped a lot of people, and I feel better, and I'm happy that I made the move. And he's happy, and he's still with me. He just turned 80 and just bought himself a brand new C8 Corvette. He's a very young 80. So it's a happy ending, and it's great. It's a great club to be part of. There's a lot of very cool people that are sober in the entertainment industry. Alice Cooper happens to be one of us, and a lot of other people it's a very cool club once you get to know that you're serious about it. And it's good. So I'm very happy.
Oh, that's very inspiring. So thank you for sharing.
You what?
Thank you. That's very inspiring.
Well, I was with it for 41 years, and I'm a cancer survivor. I'm sober. I broke my back. I have one kidney. I'm You know, so I'm here for the long haul. So God has a reason to keep me around.
We're not getting rid of you that easy, and we are so glad about that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
If there was, I'd love to know, what's one thing that you really hope people kind of take away from Eddie Munster?
Oh, I already have. He's been really good to me. The funny thing about the Munsters was this. They were based on the Universal Monsters. And if you read the script, you would look at it as like, oh, this is like really stupid. But immediately, they cease to be monsters and they become a family. You know, Herman Munster was never Frankenstein. He was Herman Munster. He resembled Frankenstein. Al Lewis was never Dracula. He was Grandpa Munster. So what happened was they found a way to take the Leave It to Beaver producers and the Universal Monsters, put them together, put a show out there that was warm and friendly, entertaining and fun, but it was a believable family unit. You believed they loved each other. You believed Lily ran the house, Eddie went to school, Marilyn went to college. The funny, pretty blonde that we thought was unfortunate, she loved her family regardless, unconditionally. It was a really cool family unit that people loved and still do. So, I was just a kid that showed up for an interview that got the part and got the luckiest 2 years of my life. It just turned out to be something that has followed me around in a good way.
Definitely. Did anybody else have any questions?
Yes.
How did you like working with Fred? Herman Munster. How did you?
Oh, Fred was. They were all really, really good, but Fred especially. Our father and some of our father and son scenes were like really, really good stuff because the way his character, he was a very intelligent guy, but he played it off as sort of a naive, tall, childlike character. And I was wise beyond my years as a little kid, so they used to call me a 39-year-old midget because they thought I was way too old for my years. So they loved the idea of me, the student becoming the teacher and the teacher becoming the student. And they played a lot of scripts when they found out that I could handle dialogue. They wrote a lot of scenes and scripts about me volunteering my dad, him never wanting to disappoint me, and getting into all these interesting little dynamics. So Fred and I had a lot of great scenes. He taught me a lot. And Al Lewis taught me a lot about life. Fred taught me a lot about acting. And everything else just fell through, everything else was just in the middle.
Sounds like you had a lot of good mentorship.
Oh, it was great. It was wonderful stuff. I mean, there was a lot of talent. In fact, there was an actor named Robert Wool who was, you may know from Arliss.
Yeah.
We were in the green room about a year ago, and I was going up to him, and he came to me and he goes, "Stop." And I go, "Hello." And he goes, "Were you aware of the greatness that you were working with in Mr. Fred Gwynn at the time?" And I said, "No, I really wasn't." I go, "I knew he was good." He goes, "That guy was like up here genius level." So a lot of people, professional people, were aware of Fred's talent, and everything he did was good, especially, his final, my cousin Vinny, but anything that he did was worth watching.
Well, the horror fans, of course, know and love
Oh, Pet Sematary.
Pet Cemetery. He is the best Judd
When he gets
ever.
hamstring, ow. And there's another thing too. You'll notice in Pet Cemetery, he talks about his dog Spot. Which, our pet dragon was Spot. That's kind of funny, like in the Lost Boys, when in their lair, they've got the Munster Go Home poster on the wall, and they talk about the little guy having the attack of Eddie Munster.
Yeah.
The Munsters have been used a lot over the years. There's a lot of references to them in a lot of TV shows. They've got a lot of staying power, a lot of big fan base, Rob Zombie, Howard Stern, Paul McCartney. I read him in Rolling Stone magazine years and years and years ago. They asked what he likes to do to relax. He goes, "I like to twist one up and watch reruns of the Munsters."
Oh, that's awesome. Is there any truth to the rumor that Fred was a little salty about being typecast as Herman?
Typecasting Herman? Oh,
Typecast as
after
Herman.
his, yeah, he did it so well that Fred had a hard time. He continued to work, but he got tired of every time people would see him on the screen, they'd be Munster. Where Al Lewis embraced it, opened a restaurant, went on the radio, ran for office as Grandpa Al Lewis, and they both lived in New York, and Al was like walking down the street, cabbie, "Hey, Grandpa," And Fred was unfortunate. He kind of tried to distance himself from it. to no avail, because when you're 6'7" and that face and that voice, you're stuck with it. But he did such a great job, and it was, one of those things that sort of caught him. At the end of his life, he was fine with it. But there was a period in time where he wished he probably hadn't done it.
Really? Yeah.
He did it too well.
Yeah.
Oh, he was great at it, yeah. What was your experience like as far as people recognizing you on the street during that time?
They really didn't, unless I was wearing my makeup. No,
You didn't look around in that?
what happens is kids are lucky because number one, when you're 12, 11, 12 every year, you look a little different. And and I went over to work at Disney, and I went over to work at My Three Sons, and so I continued working because you're growing up and you're not an adult looking the same where Fred was and Al was. So as a kid, it wasn't too bad.
So,
Now my voice was the same, still is.
I can hear it.
was there any moment on set that taught you something really important for acting?
On
Where
set.
you're like, wow, noted, got it.
Not on the Monsters so much, but there were.
Any other project?
There was, there were times, I went down to Brazil when I was 16 years old. I took a friend up for an interview, and I wound up getting a part, and this movie director was married to Rhonda Fleming at the time, and I went to Brazil when I was 16 years old, and no teacher and no parent, and all I had to do was show up for work at the hotel, which I did. But as my sister said at my AA meetings, I left as Richie Cunningham, and I came back as John Lennon in 3 months. And that's kind of when I started my partying days as a teenager. But it was interesting doing the movie in another country with there was like American actors, and then there was a Brazilian film crew, French camera crew, Chinese catering, everything. It was all over the place. But down there, I learned a lot about the appreciation of the industry and what you do and how you do it, and then coming back to America and having this movie that was supposed to be a big hit get shelved because of a Hollywood divorce, and then winding up doing Lidsville. It kind of was like I went from here to here to here, and I learned that the movie business is not a real business. It is a business, but it's not real world. So I learned that you sort of have to just deal with stuff, and you never know how things are going to work out. But I wouldn't trade working in the business for anything. I tell people it's great for communication skills, it's great for friendships, but it's very, very, very few people actually make a living at it. So look at it as a hobby that may turn into something good. I was lucky. I worked quite a bit. But I never was a career actor. I was just a kid that could memorize lines.
So you mentioned you have the YouTube channel coming up. You mentioned you're traveling in the car. What are some other things you have coming up?
There's a new show called Toy Scout. A gentleman that he's got the world's largest Disney collection, and he interviewed me about the Munster toys, and he found that we had a chemistry like American Pickers, so I'm his Frank, and it's called Toy Scout. It will be on the Discovery Channel. So that's one. I'm on Macabre Theater with Ivana Cadaver. We started that show 20 years ago, and it's on Saturday nights, double feature. It's something that I enjoy doing, but I'm really looking forward to doing the YouTube channel, and also just getting back out and traveling and doing what I like to do, which is buying and selling muscle cars. Just bought a Harley, so I'm good with that. The one-off Eddie bike, and I'm very happy. I enjoy meeting people. I'm lucky enough the Munsters falls into a lot of neat categories, so I get to travel and do a lot of different things. So I'm very blessed.
So, Munsters aside, of course, we all know and love the Munsters. We talk about it in our show all the time, actually. It comes up often. Yeah, it does. Is there something that you've done that maybe is not so well known that you want to tell people about, that you're really proud of?
Pretty much the biggest achievement the biggest achievement that I've ever done is I've helped a lot of people get, in this day and age, almost every family has someone that has an addiction issue or an alcohol issue or something going on. You hear about the word pandemic. Well, this is an epidemic in the country, and I'm working with a CBD company, as you can see if you go by my booth. It's called Rise Botanicals, and we are helping a lot of people get off drugs through CBD. It's an alternative method, and one of the things about being sober is, you stay sober by helping other people. So one of the things that I'm doing is helping a lot of people take that first step into sobriety, and I steer people towards help. And one of the neat things about it is, I'm visible about it, I'm above board about it. So a lot of people have come to me with asking for help, and I've tried to help a lot of people. So that's a good thing.
Do we have any other questions in the audience?
Was there anyone other than your friend and the director that kind of pushed you to get sober?
No, my hearing isn't what it used to be. Was it the director pushing me?
She was asking if there was a director or any other people who were kind of pushing you to go sober.
Oh, so I did hear. I guess my hearing's better than I thought. No, my mom was wonderful. She was not a stage mom. To give you an example, she would come by, I'd be playing football in 7th, 8th grade. She'd come up, roll the window down, hey, Disney interview, wanna go? No, Mom, I'm playing football. Window would go up and she would drive away. Now, she would have preferred for me to go on the interview, but she never forced me to do anything I didn't want to do. I could have worked more. There was a lot of jobs I turned down, but at the same time, that's what I think kept me balanced, because between living with my grandmother in the 5th grade in Illinois, and then in a small town in Macon, Missouri in the 8th grade, it kept me, appreciation of regular things. I never considered myself a Hollywood kid. I didn't really hang around Hollywood kids. But, so it was just a temporary job, a series of temporary jobs, but good ones. Nobody pushed me though, thanks.
So you talked about being a muscle car guy. What's your favorite muscle car that you either owned or wished you owned, anything like that?
Well, my favorite car was always going to be my first Mach 1, even though I wanted a 428, I wanted with a 351. But the car, I had a 427, 435, factory 411 gears, 4-speed black Corvette. That was just a beast. That it would have been an L88, but it didn't have aluminum heads, so it was an L73 or L71. I'm sorry, but that was my favorite car. So a C3 Vet, 69 black Vet. But my favorite muscle car, if I could have any muscle car, would probably be a Hemi Cuda.
There you go.
Any other questions out there?
Yes.
Did Pat Priest continue to act after the Munsters?
She did. She went over and she did a movie with Elvis, Easy Come, Easy Go. She played Mary Tyler on the Mary Tyler Moore Show for several years as, I believe, Phyllis's sister. And she was, you'll see her 3 or 4 times on Bewitched as Dr. Bombay's hot nurse. And then she did one of the worst horror movies of all time. She was in The Incredible Two-Headed Transplant with Ray Milland and Rosie Greer. It's like me being in The Hand of Death when I was like 7 years old. But yeah, she continued to work, but she did very well in real estate in Beverly Hills. And her mother was Treasurer of the United States in the Eisenhower administration, Ivy Baker Priest. Very, very early on, woman in politics long before it was fashionable. So she actually grew up in Washington, D.C. as a debutante back when she was a teenager.
Any other questions out there? Well, I got one. If there was, who would you absolutely just dream of, love to work with, who you haven't worked with yet?
Like right now or in the past?
Either.
Well, when I was a kid, one of the few times I got very depressed and I didn't get an interview was I went up for a movie for Disney called Summer Magic, and I was like about 10 years old, and it starred Haley Mills. Oh my God, Haley Mills, she was so hot. So that's one. I would like to work. Who would I like to work with? I don't know. I would like to work with Jack Nicholson. He's cool.
Yeah.
Jack would be a cool guy because I like that his attitude. Billy Bob Thornton. I'm a big fan of Billy Bob Thornton. He and I chatted at the TV Land Awards, and his 2 favorite series were The Munsters and Andy Griffith. So Billy Bob's my kind of guy. I like regular non-Hollywood types. Sort of people that are in the business, but they're not, Hollywood.
Yeah, totally. Any other questions?
I mean, I'm sitting next to one of the coolest guys ever, Bill Mosley. You know, Bill and I, when I first spotted I was going to sit next to Bill, this is half the fun of doing these conventions too, is because for us, we get to visit with friends, you know, while we're meeting new friends, but the idea of sitting next to Bill and, you know, Sid passed, and when I used to sit with Kane and Sid and Bill, we always had such great times, you know. So I'm really happy that Bill Mosley's one of the coolest guys going to, and he's not typical Hollywood,
Right.
you know.
He's Illinois too, right? I think he's from Illinois as well.
Yeah.
I think. I hope. I'm right. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it's a cool club. We're very lucky to be, you know, around. We do stuff we enjoy doing, and people seem to like it. And you know, back when I was a kid, this type of stuff didn't occur. This all started about 30 years ago in San Diego Comic-Con, and it just took hold. And I've been lucky enough to be part of it for the whole run.
It is true. If anyone told me 30 years ago I'd get to meet some of my heroes, let alone talk to them on the stage, well, they're nuts. And now look at us, right? We get to do these things and meet these amazing people who we maybe admired since we were kids. So it's pretty surreal. We have about 10 minutes. If anyone wants any last questions? No? Okay.
I'm gonna go put my car away. It's dodging the raindrops. The Munster coach is not a rainy day car.
Oh no.
No. Big slicks and open air is not good for rain.
Oh, I got a question. Do you have like an awesome cruising song when you're driving that thing?
Oh yeah. The Munster coach, well, back in the day it was Highway Star by Deep Purple, you know. And Going Mobile by The Who. I'm a classic rock kind of guy. And that's another thing about growing up when we grew up. We had the best music. And you could street race, and you could go down to the beach, and it didn't have to, kids, I feel sorry for kids today. They just don't know what they miss. They just don't get it.
They're not bruising their knees enough.
You know, I got along just fine with a payphone and no computer, and it's you know, it is what it is. But I feel bad because it's just. I used to tell my mom, I go, I don't know how you deal with it, seeing all the crowded people, because it used to be, when she grew up, it was like bean fields for miles to the beach, you know, it was like nobody there. So it is what it is. But yeah, there's good and bad in everything, you know. I mean, it's great to be able to call up an Uber and you GPS get you where you want to go. I mean, it's got good stuff too, it's not all bad. But I just get so tired of, you know, kids at Thanksgiving dinner and everybody looking at their iPhone. It's like, oh my God. My sister has a saying, less iPhone, more eye contact.
We need more of that in this world. Oh my goodness.
Well, it's really funny because I think she and I are maybe like the last generation. There's no evidence of any of the tomfoolery we got into, where now everything's being videoed 24/7 by everybody.
There's photographic evidence now.
Yeah, no, good luck finding it with me.
You know, it's like, when I bought my grandmother's house in Missouri that I lived in when I was 13 to save it from the wrecking ball. It was built in 1875. It was a beautiful Queen Anne, and it turned out to be haunted. So, but I'm living in this small town that I was comfortable with when I was 13. Boring. I mean, I'm glad I saved the house, but literally I was bored to death. So, I mean, here I am saying that I'm wishing that I could go back, but at the same time, you gotta keep everything in perspective. Yes. It's memory lane, and yes, you want to go back to Andy and Mayberry, and I had a TV show I did called Eddie Munster Meets Andy and Mayberry in the Twilight Zone, because it was like a haunted house in the Twilight Zone. I'm going back to a small town, and you would think that some channel with 17 paranormal shows on the air would think that somebody would want, and I told him, I'm not the star of the show, the town is going to be the star. This is going to be like Andy, you're going to love it. Could not sell it. So
What's wrong with
I sold the
everybody?
house.
We watched that.
So I put a roof on it, I fixed it up, and I sold it to somebody.
At least you saved it before you sold
I saved it. I saved it for Grandma's memory. Yes, I did. Marjorie is happy.
Do you know if it's still around today?
Excuse me?
Do you know if it is still around right now, today?
Is it haunted?
No, is it still around?
Oh yeah. My next door neighbor sends me pictures of the people that are painted in a horrible pink. And they put up a horse property fence around. I mean, they hate it. They're mad at me because what the person's done to the house, but I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know they were going to do that.
It's like Pepto-Bismol pink.
Yeah, and it's still haunted.
As it should be.
Well, maybe the ghosts will get mad at the color and cause some issues.
Yeah.
That'd be fun, right?
If you want to see videos of the ghost, I have videos on my phone of the ghost.
Oh, I would love.
I would like to see that.
Yeah. Middle of the night, 3 in the morning, the ghosts are all over the place.
That is crazy. Okay, any last questions before we let him go?
I want to thank you all for coming out.
One more time, what's your YouTube channel again?
Excuse me?
What is your YouTube channel one more time?
Oh, YouTube channel. Well, first of all, anything you ever want to know about me, now you might want to get a pen and paper out because this is hard to remember. Munsters.com. Okay, you got that? 30 years I've had this. Munsters.com will lead you to everything I do. The YouTube channel is all things Munster, and Coach to Coast, spelled with a K, like Munster's Coach. And that will lead you in Toy Scouts, but mostly just Munsters.com. And we have a lot of great merchandise. If you don't get something on the table and you see something later you want, just go to Munsters.com. We'll take care of you.
That's great. Well, Butch, thank you so much for coming
Thank
out
you,
and playing with
girls.
us. It's been an honor for us. It's been an
Yes.
honor for everyone here, I know. It's just great.
Thank you for coming out. Thank you, Bill. Thanks to David and Dad. You're at a great show, guys.
Thank you.